Tony John in conversation.
Rijks Restaurant and Rijks Museum, lounges at Schiphol Airport, London's Royal Opera House, and one of my personal favorite restaurants in terms of interior design, Café America, American Amsterdam, or Amsterdam American Hard Rock Hotel. It changed names now. Beautiful place, still very nostalgic. My guest today, the epitome of suave, in my opinion, Mr. Paul Linse, has sprinkled his interior design genius on all these places I mentioned and many, many more. A man born of complex circumstances, including the remnants of war and forced occupation, a multicultural heritage, and a no-nonsense role model in his mother, Paul grew up to believe perfection was the only standard worth meeting. This mindset would be the key building block of a stellar career and the explanation behind his disciplinarian approach to work. While all this makes the life of Paul Linse sound like an angular shape with sharp edges, the man behind the myth comes across as almost the exact opposite, radiating a warmth, charisma, and softness that is utterly comforting. After meeting Paul, it's easy to understand the impact of his work, because Paul Linse possesses that magic that makes a human being's senses come alive the moment you enter his space, or for that matter, any space he designs. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you, Tony. Keep talking.
Sorry, the flattery ends there, and now we get into the hard bits. No, but Paul, sincerely, this is my experience of you. We were
Right.
in a very big room in a beautiful hotel,
Yeah.
and your magnetism is noticed from a distance.
Oh, wow.
And it's not a magnetism that screams, "Look at me." It's just, I think it's a peace you have with yourself. I don't know how to describe it in words, but it's really yeah.
Yeah,
What do you think of that?
I hope so.
What do you think of that?
It's hard to, for me, it's hard to tell. I'm just happy with what you said. I don't want to be opulent. I like a little humbleness in people, so I'm trying. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe that's what I said. I think that's what being at peace with yourself, how it manifests in real life. You know, you don't need to do anything extra. You know, you're just content.
Yeah. Well, in my work and in my daily, well, it's not a job, it's in life. The extra mile is really, I'm really aiming for that. But in the sense of what you were just saying, maybe it's good to let go a little and see what happens.
To throw caution to the wind, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah. You speak of it as if it's an alien concept to the way you practice your life. Is it?
In what sense?
To throw caution to the wind, to not go that extra mile, to just leave it to fate.
It's a combination to me. It's the harmony of contrast. And that's what I preach every day, the harmony of contrast. Yes. And it's a lot of both, actually. That doesn't help you, right? In the answer.
No. Actually, I saw a picture in an article about you that had a little antique cabinet, I think.
Yes.
And two vases on it. And your remark was how that antique cabinet was near priceless to you, and those two vases cost nothing, but together they're perfect for each other.
Exactly.
You know?
It's about it's like normal life. It's about the balance. Trying to well, not even trying to, but live a balance.
Live a balance. Yeah. I agree, and sometimes that can be the hardest thing.
Sure.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of this journey of life, right? Striking that balance. Yeah.
And then I find it's better not to scream, but to. Well, that's what I love in Thailand. When you look at the religious guys in their robes and they're silent, but they're so charismatic. They're not screaming.
Yeah,
that's always an example for me.
Do you know why they shave the eyebrows as well and the hair and everything?
No, I don't actually.
I think it's because they want almost no characteristic anymore that you can relate to your identity. So they want to remove
Yes.
everything
Yeah.
possible.
Makes sense.
So you become a blank canvas, so to speak,
Yes.
right? You
Yes.
know?
Yes.
And then you connect with your true essence.
Yes.
And you're not identified by
ultimate uniform.
the ultimate
And,
uniform is your pure
Yes.
being,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
Yeah. Which is so beautiful, actually.
Yes.
And I think that's what you sense in people. That's what I sensed in you. But
No.
that's not to say that you're flawless. Everyone is flawed, right?
not.
But when someone is at peace, there's a kind of peace,
Yeah.
rather not
Yeah.
totality
Yeah.
as a concept. But when someone is at peace with who they are, I feel like they're connected with that inner self. In
Probably,
a little way, in bigger ways sometimes, but I think we feel it in others, and then we want to be.
Yeah.
I'm curious about that. That's why I wanted to talk to you. I was curious about that connection, and I wanted to know more about how was it established? What happens in your life that helps you maintain that connection?
Yeah.
But before we get into that, I need some terminology cleared, right? And I want you to help me with this. Architecture versus industrial design rather versus interior design. Architecture, industrial design, interior design. Can you just help explain these the differences or the similarities?
Yeah. Well, the architecture is about the building's exterior, and also the constructive part of a building, and it has a lot to do with the flows. How do you approach a building? How do you enter a building? How does it invite you to do what's necessary? And the next step would be interior design to help that, actually. And it's I always say it's your third layer. You have your skin, you have your what you're wearing, and then there's the space.
The space being the third layer.
Being the third layer, yes, and it's zooming in on the architecture. And it has a lot to do with tactility and the way we sit here. I mean, I'm not looking at it, but it's a carpet. There's a soft carpet. You can hear it in my voice. I can hear it in your voice. There's a double door over there, which is totally different than if it would have been a single door opening towards what direction, and what does that direction mean? So those are all ingredients, very different, important ingredients, how to experience a space. And yes, a wallpaper or a color, that's also important, but I tend to call that an important cosmetic part of the whole of everything. But if the base is not right, if the chronology, is that a word?
Yeah.
Of the spaces is not right, then you can buy the most expensive silk, if you want, wallpaper, but it will never be okay.
So architecture is, for lack of a better word, the shell that you encounter, right?
Yes.
And then the shell is inviting or not. Bad architecture makes you not want to explore what's within the shell, right?
Yeah.
Good architecture probably invites you into that shell.
Yeah.
And the moment you cross that threshold, you enter the realm of interior design's impact on you.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes. And industrial design, I studied industrial design, actually. Well, that's in essence about designing products that are produced in an industrial way. So the carpet here, the table here, the microphone here, but also what you're wearing, everything that we see here. But when you look outside, hopefully you see some trees, not the trees, but here,
everything
all
else,
the loose products here. But I do see a socket there. That's also industrial design. But a fabric is also industrial design. So it actually the name itself already explains it.
So the wallpaper is industrial design, but how you use it, what kind of wallpaper,
that's interior design.
That's interior design.
Yes, and when I was in college in Eindhoven, nowadays it's called the Design Academy, very famous academy by now. What I did is I would design a table but I wouldn't design it at first. I would come up with a space, and then I would say, this is my space, and okay, the assignment is to design a table, so I'll design a table for this space. So it's always about context. I can never see things without the connections, and so contextual design, that's what I do. Yeah.
So doesn't all design always end up being contextual design? Does design stand in a vacuum alone?
No, but I have to say, often it is approached in that way. In that way, you know.
Okay.
You cannot always dictate where, for example, this table, where it will live its life. It's designed maybe in Denmark, maybe in Italy, and so that maybe that's residential design, but it's meant for residential design, and you're not in power to do. But wherever I can, I want to design the whole chain. You know, it's a chain, and it starts at home, and then you go out. That's why I love public spaces where people meet, where different, very different, all the dynamics of us, our species actually, and they haven't developed. Our brains didn't really develop, and it's all about looking at each other. It's all about people, but then creating a designed environment that invites, that makes you feel good, that makes you want to do instinctively what the owner of the building wanted you to do.
So the purpose of the space gets utilized because of the way it's designed, that encourages you. You studied to be an industrial designer.
Wow.
You are an interior designer, and you work with architects. Did you also study architecture?
No.
You didn't?
No. I do have architects in my team.
Yeah.
Yeah. As I just said, in college, it already started that I couldn't design a product if I didn't know the space. So already in college they said, "Aren't you an architect, or at least an interior architect?" I said, "No, it's not about this or that. I'm here now. I'm doing this now, but within this context." So I moved to interior architecture, and I'm not an interior architect officially. Yeah.
You're not an interior architect.
No, I haven't studied that. So,
but you have architects in your team.
I have architects in my team, interior architects,
Okay.
and I studied industrial design and moved to interiors because I couldn't help doing that.
So your studio presents itself as an interior design studio first?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But you also solve other problems related to architecture, for example. But
Yes.
first and foremost, we are about the interior
Yes.
experience of spaces,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Do you also do private residencies?
Yes.
Yeah. What's the difference between designing for a few versus designing for many? And a few meaning a family, for example, or a person's home versus public spaces, as you mentioned, a large building, the Rijksmuseum, right? You know, what's the difference between
There's a
those
huge difference. Person's home, person,
Yeah.
personal. What I let me say it in that way. What I love about public spaces is that you can take distance, look at it, and look at the abstract dynamics. Residential design, I hardly ever do. So the answer was yes, but
Okay,
I hardly ever do that, depending on the situation, on the people, because it is so personal. I really admire interior architects that can deal with that, because every week
mean
there
like
can be
residentials?
residential design, residential assignments. There's all I work on like 20, 25 projects at the same time, always.
Yeah.
And there's always one residential project. Because and then the houses or the apartments are so special and so big, and the art collections, etc., are they have to be protected, so they cannot be in magazines or whatever, not even in snapshots, and that's not what it's about to me also. And there, it's the functionality is less important. Of course, it's important. The bathroom has to work, right, etc. And the durability and sustainability, and then the flows, etc. But there, the personal, you're trying to get into the heads of one or two people, and because that's what I do. I don't make anything for myself. Make something
You're there to serve the other.
Yes,
whatever the other may be.
Yes, and how will they feel? How will they wake up? Because that's, to me, in essence, the difference. They sleep there.
So sleep is the factor.
Yeah, yes, and so the next thing would be, if you look at public design, a hotel. And they're also so different from an office, a restaurant, an airport. You sleep there and you wake up there. You have to feel safe there. So in a very, very, very essential manner, a home is just that. It's your shelter, and that's where you have to feel protected, but also entertained. So you'll have friends and family, etc. But the dynamics to me are sometimes too much.
So from an outsider's point of view, Paul, let me tell you something curious here, right? I would say, if someone asked me this question, that designing a home would be an easier exercise than a public space, because at least then you've narrowed it down to one or two opinions.
Yes.
In a public space, you're supposed to create something that can please or cater to a multitude of different personalities and people, right? So it kind of feels like a public space challenge is more complex than a private home. The perimeters are defined in a private home because of the human elements in that, which are limited. And in public space, it's unlimited. At least from an outsider's point of view, that's how I see it.
Yes, I'll probably. I can't convince you, I think, and it's just my opinion.
Yeah.
And that's why I said
I'm curious
I
about that.
Yeah,
because
well,
from the practice, you feel the other way around, right? And that's interesting to me.
Well, it's also a target group that travels the world constantly and sees things and is insecure, and it's about their home. It's almost about your child, you know, and so as opposed to the more professional world, there are you get a brief and a manual or a brief, 100 pages, what it's about, what maybe about the brand or what are we aiming for, and they don't have to sleep there. So,
but you do hotels, right?
Yes. So
then it overlaps with the resident.
Because that's why I find
it
it very interesting. Yeah. Yes, hotels. That I find interesting, but a private, maybe a couple. You know, they my experience. They can change their mind every week or every night, and that's at the end of the day not really me. It's because I'm trying really to get into your head, and then I think, okay, I'm there. I get you now, and maybe I didn't get you, and so it's, to me, it's way more complicated than the abstractness of a commercial project. Because Rijksmuseum is also, it's cultural, but it's also commercial. Or the Maritime Museum,
Somehow or other, I kind of feel this is tied into your personality trait of setting such a high standard, right? And I can imagine
Maybe.
You
Yeah.
want to really understand what my, if I'm commissioning your work, you want to understand what my needs truly and
Yes.
completely are, and you want to
Yes.
deliver that to me, give
Yeah.
me that,
Yeah.
and that indeed is, it becomes a human problem
It does. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you're dependent on me.
It's almost
Yeah.
like an actor. Like an actor is becoming
Yes. Yeah.
that role. He is becoming. I mean, I'm not an actor, but
Yeah.
I think I can relate to that.
Yeah.
That you're trying to become that person and see through their eyes.
Yeah. And that I find taxing, emotionally, intellectually taxing, compared to it's Rijksmuseum. Here are the perimeters of the project. Here's
Yes.
who the person utilizing the space is
Yeah.
going to be. Once that's defined, it's defined.
Yes.
You know, you don't have to get into each individual's mind and
Yeah.
find out what pleases you. Is it blue or pink, right? You know?
Yeah, and it's not about personal taste.
Yeah.
Then,
Yeah,
because
correct.
when you would say to me, "I don't like blue," and that's yeah, well, okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean anything to me. It means a lot to you, but it doesn't mean anything to me. As opposed to a cultural commercial project or a hotel, it's not about that. And I always try to stay away from personal taste, and you can never exclude it. What about my own personal taste? You know.
And that ties into your statement, right? You inhibit the other.
Yes.
You bring your own sense of design,
Yeah.
but you want to inhibit the other.
Yes.
And the other could also be a space,
Yes.
could be a building, right? And you want to inhibit that, understand what its function is.
Yes.
And then I must say one thing though, which you differentiated private spaces to public spaces, but my feeling in the spaces that you've designed that I've had the privilege to visit is that they do feel welcoming. And I think if a place doesn't make you feel safe, you're not going to stay there for long. And the Café Americain, for example, the reason I love it is because maybe it's my background. I come from a former British colony in Malaysia.
Yes.
And there are buildings that remind me of the colonial era. You know, it's Art Nouveau, but it's also this feeling of it's a moment in time captured within the walls, right? And I always end up staying there longer than I plan to, because it just is, I don't want to leave that space. So in that sense, there is comfort and safety and welcoming, you know, also in public spaces that you design.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah. Well, at least it's anecdotal. It's my experience, but it is an experience that I have, you know.
Yes. Well, and the fun part for me about this is that I work a lot with listed buildings, and there you get a lot for free.
What do you mean by
there's a whole story already there, and my duty is to take that story into a new future.
So you honor the story, and yet you help it evolve.
Yes, and give the old something new. And in an evolutionary way, and in a very hopefully a logical way, and not offending. What I really love is when people tell me that they felt so good in that space, and what they had, maybe and drinks. They talk about the drinks, etc. And they felt so well there, and they didn't mention the design.
Yeah,
and that's what I love. Then it's.
But that's when you are not there, but your creation is so alive, right?
Oh, yeah,
the impact that you made. Yeah.
Yeah, and but so. And don't. That's why I always try not to overdo it, and give some freedom to the people that use the spaces, and they're the actors in that space, and it's not about our design.
Yeah, it's interesting. I keep seeing these two pictures. I forget which building this is. It could be Capital C or another one, where you use kind of like terrazzo or broken marble.
That's I think
Was it
capital C.
Was it capital
Yes,
C?
yeah.
And then I remember, again, going back to Cafe America with the huge plants and the big windows and the
Yeah.
feeling of, I always get brown, but the most comforting, wooden brown in my mind
Yes.
when I think of it, right?
Yeah.
And then the green of nature, right?
Yes.
And maybe that connects me emotionally to my childhood, growing up in the tropics. And that's why I don't want to leave there, right?
Yes.
But at the same time, what I'm fascinated with, they're so different in style,
Yes.
So again, because that was a question I had. What is Paul Linse?
That was my question actually.
Yeah.
But because I'm always very, very glad to hear that people do see a style, because I serve my clients, and as I said, it's not about me. That's also what I tell my people, my team. It's not about us, and so that's it. I still find that also at this age and time.
How do you keep that ego
Yeah,
in
well,
check?
well, there's a mentality. There is at the end of the day, there's the same mentality. Whether you're working on a huge 5-star hotel or a very small, very, very, very special room that's about whiskey, tiny room, but so intense, and or an office. We also work on offices, and at the end of the day, it's the same mentality, and it's always to try to do less, trying to do less, trying to not be trendy, and not forgetting the time and age that you live in. And so it's all about doing something and trying not to do it, and see how that works in the balance. And that's, I always tell potential clients, if you want to work with me, don't expect something trendy or fashionable, but something that fits the time. And hopefully in 10 years still does, and that's difficult nowadays. On the other hand, what I find the biggest compliment always is if somebody's been in a newly designed space of ours or of mine, that they say, "Oh, it feels like it's always been there," or did you just do that? Oh, okay. It felt like it's been there for years, and that I love. And
would that be how you might describe the Paul Linse element? That feeling versus a design component or a style or whatever. It's that feeling, right?
Yes, that's yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah,
okay,
maybe, yeah.
But that is, I always think of word of mouth, right?
Yes.
What is that one sentence? What are those words that one would use to describe a creative? And you are a creative. There's no doubt about that, right? Yeah. And that's why I mentioned the word ego earlier, because it's so much easier to develop that word of mouth statement about you as a person by putting your ego up first and saying, this is my design style. I have a splash of color somewhere, right? But to extract the ego from that process.
Yes.
And if the word of mouth is the feeling that actually in the ideal situation, someone's going to visit a new place and walk away thinking, it's always been here.
Yes.
This is how it's always looked.
Yes.
I mean, that's the ultimate compliment to you, right?
Yes.
But that is devoid of ego then. So you really don't, you dissolve into the creation.
Yes.
And the creation stands for itself, right?
I hope so, yes.
But it's interesting how someone would say, hey, you got to speak to Paul. His work is interesting, right? Because everyone, we like boxes.
Yes.
We like putting people and creativity into boxes, right?
Yes.
And it's like this, and it's like that.
Especially in nowadays, it's all about identity. It seems to be the only thing we talk about, with identities. So and I relate that to boxes.
Yeah.
So we're looking for equality, etc., which is really good. And we're talking about the differences and the different identities of people,
Yeah.
of things, of spaces. And as you said, we want to put them into boxes. And that's where I stop a little bit, because try to put me in a box. Good luck with that.
So I wrote something about you earlier. Did I put you in a box?
You didn't put me in a box.
Okay.
No, I actually... no, I was very pleased to hear what you said, because it was about not putting me in a box.
Interesting. Because ironically, that's what drew me to you. Your identity, with words, without words, with energy, with your aura, right? That's what made you fascinating. And then I discover that you are responsible for this beautiful little whiskey room, right? And I got a chance to visit it. But all of that is secondary to the first instinct, that human instinct of looking at someone across the room and feeling, something's going on there. Yes. It's quite interesting, right? So I believe that identity plays a role, but if you need that identity to have defined perimeters, that's willing to say there's something about this person, this energy, this identity that I like, but you're open to also you being wrong about what you thought, right? And I think that I think is what happens with your design. You go in there and you leave, and someone tells you it was just redesigned or renovated by Paul Linse, and you're like, oh my goodness. And that's the challenge, the contradiction. I really thought it was here forever. And I just realized it opened last week. How is that possible, right?
So there's a natural, logical sense of just feeling well.
Feeling well. Paul, I want to visit something that is very personal. I hope you don't mind. Your life story has got a very prominent figure, at least the early part of your life story, which is your mother.
Yes.
Right? So she had Dutch, German, and Indonesian ancestry.
Yes.
Correct? She lived through the Japanese occupation of the Dutch East Indies, which is Indonesia today. She was even in a camp.
Yes.
Right? And in one of the interviews, you mentioned a very interesting concept, I find, and I discovered this through this philosopher called Eckhart Tolle, which is called the pain body. And the pain body is a kind of trauma that you can inherit.
Yes.
And the person may not even want to give it to you, but because they carry it and as a bond of a child and mother, you inherit the pain body, the traumas. And you spoke about that, right?
Yes.
Today, and you still have a lot of life to live, but you've also lived a lot of life. And today, how does your mother figure in your life story?
I speak to her every day.
Yeah.
She's 90. And, again, it's always yin yang in my life here as well. Yes, there's a very difficult background there. On the other hand, it's layered, and it's interesting. Maybe it's a bit strange to say so, but it's also interesting, and I'm not fighting that. I think I'm embracing it, and I mean, you have your background and family, etc., and we all have it, and she doesn't really talk about it, but the fear is in the air, always, and always has been, and I think as a child I sensed, of course I sensed that, but in an abstract way I understood and didn't blame anybody for that. It's just something that you had to carry, and you better embrace it rather than fight it. And so also now, now that she's getting really old, she does have her moments, and then I don't know. We talk about it briefly, and I try to distract her, and that's fine. It's all.
Are the moments related to her traumas that she suffered?
Probably. It's always
Okay.
about. I think it's about experience, and it's about character. How it's always a combination. I think, and I think she does have a character that that what she experienced was not good, considering what her character. So.
What crazy question, because impossible to answer, right? But if you extract the story of the Japanese occupation and what she suffered at camp, right? What could be the character of your mother? Do you see traces of who she is
Without
that? Yeah.
That is difficult to answer. I do think that she would have been a person anyway that would be concerned about things,
Which is her nature.
Which is her nature.
Yeah.
And so her brothers and sisters never had huge problems with the same background. But she was also the youngest, and she was also she was 12 to 16 years old. Well, that age. So there are, of course, a lot of factors that influence everything, but I do think that she's a very powerful, insecure woman, and that combination, harmony of contrast, I think is beautiful.
That is beautiful.
Yeah.
A powerful yet insecure woman.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Wow, that is really interesting. And she's lived 90 years, or at least
to now,
a large
yeah.
part of it,
Yes.
living on that line
Yes.
of having these two traits. What of her do you see in you?
The same thing.
Yeah?
Yes, I would say, yeah.
And to the outside world, again, this is the ego question. To the outside world, all they see is this incredible portfolio of tremendous success, right, in your chosen profession. All right. Why would you be insecure, Paul?
Yeah.
What might make a man like
Well,
you insecure?
You read that interview. It was an analyst once that I had I saw him a couple of times, and then he said, "Wow, you seem to be a very clever guy, but you never learned that traumas are they can be. You just mentioned it. Transferred.
Yeah.
Yes, and they will be transferred, and and I found that gave me a huge insight in a lot of things. But what makes you insecure? Well, maybe nowadays not too much anymore.
Yeah. Sometimes I think it's the unknown that makes us fearful.
Of course.
And sometimes it's just accepting that the unknown can exist, like trauma can be transferred, right? Just accepting that sometimes brings a modicum of peace, right?
Yes.
Because you don't have to figure everything out.
Yes. No. Yeah, I agree. I think fear does still play in this species, our lives, a huge role. And it's all about finding security, finding safety,
fight, flight, or freeze. I mean, that's the basic hardwiring of.
Yes, and that's no difference from 10,000 years ago.
Yeah, yeah. So that's why thinking of your mother. So my grandmother lived through the Japanese occupation as well, of Malaysia at that point in time. But I think I don't know the history of what happened in Indonesia, but what happened in Malaysia was actually especially vicious against the Chinese population.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was very, very extreme what they did to the Chinese population in Malaysia, Japanese. But bearing witness to this and this idea that it could happen to me, right? It affects everyone, and there's a basis of fear.
Yes.
Of fear for yourself, the safety of your loved ones, etc., not
Yes.
knowing what's going to happen tomorrow because you're stripped of all power, right? Someone else is taking it. And my grandmother, after the occupation, she also grew up with this with that being foundational to her.
Yes.
And that's why she always fought for her children and her grandchildren to not feel that. And ironically, she married a man who was like a dictator. And it's interesting that a girl marries her father. These old expressions, right? It's familiar.
Yes.
And sometimes you can't tell if it's familiar good or familiar bad, but it's familiar.
Yes.
So you gravitate to familiarity.
Yes.
I think that sometimes is what the pain body, the trauma can do.
Yes.
It's familiar, and without realizing it, if you're not conscious,
you're repeating
that. You move towards it again. Yeah.
Because repetition feels good also.
Yeah. And it gives you this weird idea that you're in control.
Yeah.
Even when you're harming yourself.
Because it's what you know.
Yeah. But your good friend, Ray, taught you to see life from different perspectives.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And you mentioned that as something very important to you to practice that.
Yes. Yes.
And what is it about? Do you not see it happening enough in the world that people are willing to look at the other side? Or do you think that is what we're doing?
I think I see it in a very simple way. I mean, we talked about identity, and we didn't mention the word discrimination. You and I were both different than most people we see here in the street, and also that I think it's about fear, the unknown. So what you don't know when you look at animals, if there's something wrong with with one of them, they leave it there and it dies, or they fight it. And so it's animal behavior. I'm not saying that I'm happy with it, but and I'm also not sure if I'm answering your question at the moment.
No, but I like where you're going with this. Wherever it's going to take.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. No, but I think what I don't see, in my opinion, in my experience, happening a lot is accepting parts of how we think or not think. Maybe it's not think.
So you're talking about an internal process.
Yes, and I think we're very hard on ourselves and on other people. And if you look in traffic, how do we behave in traffic? I think the animal comes out in traffic, but I think it's all explainable, and it leads back to thousands and thousands of years ago, when we were, I don't know, hunting. When we would be the first, you had to come home with something, and so it's and that I find interesting. And of course, I hate it when somebody, and maybe I even do it, but I think that's very hard to tell for yourself. But I think there are so many psychological processes that we don't accept of ourselves, and beat each other and other people up with it.
Very, very fascinating. I, as you said, you and I look different from the majority of people, right? Would you find it odd if I told you, I've been here since 1999, so it's 23 years now, right? Would it sound odd if I told you in 23 years I've never felt discriminated in this country?
No, because I expected you to say that.
Tell me why.
And because I have the same, that's a feeling.
Yeah.
It's almost on a daily basis that I tell people, friends, this. Just last weekend, I told people this, that I never ever felt discriminated.
What do you think or feel when you hear stories of people who say they are discriminated at a very frequent basis?
Yes. That it's their genuine experience. It's not mine. It's their genuine experience, and that's a problem. And it's a problem that I may not realize, and I'm starting to realize this.
Do you need to realize it? That's my moral dilemma, because I kind of feel I'm living on a cloud. I've been accused of that. You're living on a cloud. You're not living on earth. You don't understand what's going on the ground.
You're supposed to feel discriminated.
Yeah, for lack of a better expression, Paul, yes, that's the feeling I get. You're telling me that I need to support this notion that because of the way I look, I experience unpleasantness from people on a regular basis, but I have the exact opposite, and it's sometimes hard discussions.
Really? Yes.
Yeah, just for me to say it's not the case with me,
Yes. Well, it's actually even more surprising that you're saying that than that as opposed to myself, because I grew up in very Dutch with a Dutch father and a half Dutch mother, and the other half, my mother was half of it was German, and then it was Indonesian Portuguese, so a Dutch family, and here you are. Different language, Malaysian,
Indian ancestry, coming to the Netherlands as an adult. Yeah.
So that's that's even more intense in that sense. So maybe, although I did sense it. Yeah.
Let me tell you the story I tell. It's like the fable of my life and why I feel this way. And maybe it'll give some perspective to your statement of the same nature, because you said the same thing, I don't feel discriminated. I came here for the first time in 1993 or 94, I think. It was a short holiday because my wife is Dutch from Amsterdam. So I came here for the first time for a family event. Yeah. And on the day we arrived in Amsterdam, for some reason, she had to do something, and she said, just explore the city, and we're going to rendezvous in Dam Square or something like that. I said, fine.
Yeah.
I go walking around Amsterdam. I'm this Asian dude who's never left Asia, coming to Europe for the first time, part of a colony, a British colony, which separated so clearly from the rest through their physical appearance, right?
Sure.
And I come here to Europe, and I'm walking to places in Amsterdam, in the center of Amsterdam, and everybody starts speaking to me in Dutch first. And I'm utterly confused about what's going on. And I didn't say it. I said, interestingly, I might have even felt discriminated at that point in time. And I kept saying, I'm sorry, I don't speak Dutch. Can you tell, what did you tell me in English, if possible?
Like a reverse discrimination.
Yeah. And in retrospect, I realized I was the one who was thinking myself different from everyone else, because I am dropped here in the middle of Amsterdam in Western Europe, right? And everybody sees me as one of them.
Yes. Well,
that was my experience. Yes. And I keep saying, how can there be discrimination? There can be individuals who have extreme ideas based on skin color or race or religion, and that they exist everywhere in the world, right? Yes. But if this is the experience, if a Dutch person cannot be defined anymore, meaning you cannot say by, like Japan. Japan is like a monoculture country still. It's one of the few left in the world, right? Holland is the opposite. 180 nationalities in Amsterdam and cultures, right? So there is no definition of what a Dutch person is. And I lived through that by having all these strangers speak to me in Dutch, right? And I often say that's maybe why I don't feel discriminated here, because they don't know if I'm them, part of the tribe or not.
Yeah.
You know?
Maybe it's also a luxury that we don't feel discriminated, you know, because I do. I know that a lot of people do feel discriminated, and they're maybe they're not so lucky with a certain background, because he has an insecure mother, but very proud, you know, and
So she instilled that pride in you
yeah,
as well.
probably. So I don't feel that I can not understand people, but I'm not in a position of saying that I don't believe them. So, and if more and more people say that Zwarte Piet is wrong, then I think we should ask ourselves
Yeah.
questions and say, okay, now then it's time to change, because change is the only evidence of life, right?
Yeah.
So, and I do find it difficult. I mean, I deal with change every day in my life, and it's difficult, but it's also very interesting. So, after being surprised about this Zwarte Piet discussion years ago, and then it's growing on you, and then I feel like, okay, you have to accept that the world changes, and that people see other things than you see, and how do you work with that? And it's so, but it's always it's not easy, and but I hope I can keep an open mind to things that I don't understand.
There's a parallel between what you do and this discussion we're having about Zwarte Piet, which is, you said, I work a lot with monumental buildings, right?
Yes.
And what you do is you honor its history and heritage, and you help it evolve.
Definitely, yes.
And I think therein lies where the conversation sometimes goes wrong on the topic of Zwarte Piet, for example,
Yes.
right? Which is, it's about blackface, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's not accepted. And the conversation is never I think it's never ever had without emotions involved. Firstly,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of heavy emotions involved, and number two, I've never heard a conversation where someone is trying to figure out how can we honor the history and tradition, the heritage of this, and help it evolve
Exactly.
because of the changes in
Yes.
society and norms.
Well, and keep it relevant. I think
Yeah.
relevance is it's a word we haven't used yet, but I think relevance is key to everything in life.
Can relevance mean something doesn't need to exist anymore?
Again, sorry.
Can
yeah?
the word relevance
Yeah.
result in something not
Hmm.
having a purpose to exist anymore? It's not relevant
Maybe.
anymore, so we don't need
Yes.
it anymore.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I mean, not in that particular manner or way or sense, and maybe we should look at it again, or look at it. It's all about perspectives.
Yeah.
We all have different perspectives, and yeah. My father traveled. My father started from a Rotterdam family, and he was. Well, it was clear that he had to be a sailor back in the 50s. So he, for like 8 years, he sailed the world. And he got to know especially South America and Suriname. And he loves Suriname people, the whole mentality. And he loves that culture, but and he's very curious, and we traveled a lot as a family back then. Holidays, always going everywhere, and he always said, I love that culture. Oh, there are Suriname people here in this room. Let's sit there and talk to them. But he did use. Well, not the N word, but you know the word I
yes.
mean, and
Which is still commonly used in Dutch. Yeah.
Yes, and he's 90, and he loves, well, to put it in a very simple, he loves black people.
Yeah.
And
he's white, your father?
He's white.
Okay.
He's from Rotterdam.
Okay.
And he loves black people, and still does use the word starting with an N.
Yeah.
And then I well, yeah, well, and then you can be offended, okay, the world changes, but he's old, and it's what he knows, and but it's so interesting that here's a guy that's so interested in that culture, and calls it by a name that nowadays we don't accept anymore, which we have to accept, I think, but see what happens in the room when he talks about it.
So what I find scary about the scenario you just painted is that no one, well, I'm using an absolute term, it's not the case, but it feels like intention is irrelevant. It feels like your father's intention of celebrating people that he feels an affinity to and a closeness to is irrelevant because you happen to use a taboo word, wrong word.
Yes.
And I have great discomfort with that. I have great discomfort. I think we always need to ask what's behind it, find out, you know. And it changes everything completely when he gets a chance to explain how he feels about this person, which he used the wrong word for, supposedly. And if you pay attention, you'll realize, oh my goodness, it's exactly the opposite of what I thought he felt about the person.
Yes, and if you know that the intention is so good from the heart, then I think it's so unforgiving, you know, and so harsh to just say, to focus on that.
Yeah.
Well.
Yeah, and that's kind of like my personal issue with the fact that words now apparently are the guidelines for thought police. Yeah. So if you use certain words, the thought police say, you have bad intentions.
Yes.
You know, and you don't give room for ignorance that norms and cultures and language has changed, right? It means something else. I see it with my son. Amongst his peer group, and he's a late teenager, their language use is completely different, and sometimes he uses a word, and I'm like, oh my God, what are you trying to say? And he says, Dad, cool down. It's nothing like that. Yes. We mean it differently.
Yes.
You know, and language is a living thing.
Yes. Oh,
language is alive, right? So why do you treat language like it's an absolute, like a word has a defined absolute meaning? You know?
It's an organic hybrid.
Like all wonderful things are.
Yes. Yeah. And I almost love language more than design, actually.
Do you express that love in certain shapes and forms?
Well, I do write a lot, and also for a magazine. And so I love... yes, I do. And I write a lot for the projects because... well, it's the story that you write, and so I love that. Yeah,
I share that with you.
I know you do. Definitely. And how it changes. Although I do have difficulties with it because in my upbringing it was so strict. Yeah, and your Dutch had to be like 1,000% perfect, and language changes.
Yeah.
So I have to accept that, and I read a lot about it, and talk a lot about it. The people that see me on a daily basis, I think I'm driving them mad with it. But
no, I think it's important. You know what I do to manage this fear? Because when it comes to writing, I'm also very much a perfectionist.
Yes.
But perfection is also... perfection, linguistic or literature-based perfection is also being brave enough to step into unknown territory, I think.
Yes.
The most perfect, perfect is a terrible word, but the most memorable pieces of literature I've ever written are the ones that, in little ways, have broken the rules, but the way they broke it, for me, it's like I can never go back to the rule anymore because the way they broke it has opened up a whole new world for me, right? And Again, I'm so lucky I'm here because there are words like gezellig. There is no English equivalent, right?
No.
And what I learned from that is that be brave enough in English to create your own new word.
Yes.
And if people don't understand it, it doesn't matter, as long as they get a chance to ask, what
Yes.
does this mean? Or in the context,
Yes.
they kind of get a feeling this is
Yes.
leaning towards this, right?
What would be a word
For gezellig?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I think
Okay.
there are too many English words like
Yes.
cozy and
Yeah.
a feeling of comfort
Yes.
and
Yes.
and warmth and
Yes.
welcoming. You know,
Yes.
it's all
Yes.
those things put in one.
Yes.
And I'm now finally, my wise old age, okay, I'm becoming comfortable with playing with English, with the language
Right.
at least,
Yeah.
and being unafraid for someone to say that's a grammatical error or that's a spelling error, because then for me I see it as an opportunity now to have a
Yes.
conversation, you know.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
It's an opening. Yeah.
Yeah, and I suspect in a way, all creative people long for that. They long
Yes.
to step across that line, you know,
Yes.
because we're trained to draw within the lines.
Yes, and to look for escapes
And yeah, but
from mediocreness.
that's human nature, right? We do not want to be mediocre, I think.
Is it?
I don't know, because there's fitting in. I think we all want to. We are tribal. We want to belong, but mediocrity. I think no one wants to be unmemorable. Or is that just me thinking that?
Well, unmemorable is it's something different to me. I mean, I think if you look at my profession, if you look at on television, there are programs about interiors, and they all have their L-shaped sofa. They all have their visgaat parquet. You have to have an island, a kitchen. You have to have this island. And we tend to talk about authenticity all day long, and things have to be real. And we don't mind a PVC wooden floor. We don't mind fake marble in the kitchen. And I can go on and on. And we don't even mind plastic plants anymore. No. And I have to work with that, of course, also. And I'm not saying I don't want to do it, or it's just surprising to me how things can exist next to each other, and but looking for authenticity, honesty, realness on a PVC wooden floor that pretends to come from a forest.
Have you made? I think there's some lines you just can't cross.
No, I do say to clients that really want that. I say, okay, but let's go to that PVC forest and pick some trees.
Yeah,
I've never been there, and.
What is it? Is it cost, or is it that some people actually think, you know what, this plastic plant, this fake plant is so beautiful, and I don't have to water it, and it's going to remain beautiful forever?
It's a lot of things, and it's to me it's mainly about I can't find a word. That it doesn't have to be the intention that something in our brain says, okay, that's enough. I get it. This is supposed to be a wooden floor. It's not. But so now we can clean it. There's no stains, etc. And sorry, I can't find the right word. But it doesn't have to be obviously the real thing. And I find that so surprising in this time and age about, again, identity, the realness. Look me in the eyes and tell me the truth, and digging for it, and then so that's just puzzling to me and interesting.
So that's also where you get to be confronted with yourself, right?
Yes.
And your own ideas of right and wrong. And
yes, and what I was taught.
Yeah.
Or not. And
so
yeah.
We just had a time check because you're in a rush. I have two things in my long list of things to you. So we'll have to do a sequel to this, Paul, one day down the line. But there are some statements that you've made, and I want to talk about some of them. Trust no one but yourself.
I briefly talked about my father, but we're back to my mother now.
Okay.
Yeah,
Trust no one but
that's
yourself.
what I was taught. There's one person in the world that you can really rely on, and that's yourself. And you have to take care of that person. Otherwise, you can't take care of other persons. But that will be your ultimate escape.
Your mother taught you that.
Yes.
That's amazing. That's beautiful. It's the story we get on flights, right? If something's happening,
and
put the oxygen mask on.
Yes, and I always, funny you should mention that. I always think of that. Yeah.
But it's so true, because some people might see that as a fatalistic statement.
Mm-hmm.
Trust no one but yourself. You know, you're living in a very lonely world, and you know. But I see it as exactly that. You need to nurture and water this plant that is you.
Yes.
Otherwise, it dies, and if it dies, you can't do anything for anyone. You know? So you have to take care of yourself. Beautiful. I'm so glad I asked you that. It's not about money, but about taste.
That's so true. I don't know when I said that, maybe 40 years ago. It is. I mean, you can find things in the street. Just the other day, I found something beautiful in the street in Paris. And I have a lot of art in my house. And I had a visitor, and she said, "Oh wow, I love that piece," and that was the piece that I found in the street.
So you pick it up?
Yeah, it was actually on a piece of plaster, and somebody just painted it, drew it on it, and so it's nothing fancy. Yeah. I just broke the plaster and took it home. Now there's a lot of art in there, and that piece, a lot of people say, "Oh wow, who's that from?" And it's so that it costs a thing, but it's about recognizing quality, maybe. And
so you saw something beautiful in that piece of plaster, and that's why it's on the wall.
Yes, and oh my God, I see a lot of expensive interiors that are so not about good taste, and I see less expensive interiors that do express, in my eyes, taste and quality.
Okay. The last one or two. What's the ultimate compliment you've received as a professional?
I think we already went through that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Back to your house. What's your favorite part of your home? Your main home. The one you spend the most time in. What's your favorite room in there? What's the favorite aspect about it?
It's definitely not the kitchen.
No?
No.
Why? Is it because you don't like cooking?
I'm not very interested in it.
You're not very interested, okay.
And now we talked about what you see nowadays in houses and the open kitchen. No, I don't need. I'm promising way too much, you know. And to me, a kitchen is functional, and of course has to be beautiful, but it's functional, etc. And it's not the heart of the home. I see my house as a gallery, and I regretted that I need furniture, because I do see my parents every week. They need a sofa, and my sisters need a sofa. Maybe I need it. I would say what I call the living room. And
so wait a minute. Yeah. Given a choice, you would not have furniture? Yes. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. I
what's
feel
the purpose
aesthetic in a museum.
Yeah.
Or in a gallery, and they just have one minimalistic, simplistic bench, and then I sit there and I'm like, okay, leave me here.
So the word is living room, right?
Yes.
Okay. So that means you've redefined the meaning of living. Living is standing there, observing this beauty around you. And if your feet feel kind of tired, you sit on the bench for a moment, and then you that's living, right?
Yeah. But I can't do it, you know. I also have a normal life.
Yeah.
And it's well, there are you know, the fashion designer Rick Owen.
Yeah.
Have you seen his home?
Yeah.
He
no,
does.
I haven't seen his home.
You should check that out. He does it. Does do it. I can't do it because well, at the end of the day, I can't do it. But it's But I do have visitors that say, "Oh wow, this is like a museum." Children,
Yeah.
or friends, they say, "Oh, this is like a museum." And I'm like,
I did it. I did it. That's exactly the reaction I wanted. It's funny. Steve Jobs had a kind of similar thing where he refused to get anything for the sake of its functional use. So apparently for the longest time, he sat on the floor until he found the perfect sofa.
Yes.
And then he bought it. And
Yes.
before that, it was the perfect rug.
Yes.
He just had a rug in there. But, apparently, I mean, it could be an urban legend, but apparently that's how he lived his life.
Yeah.
Which is why he found the perfect turtleneck from Yohji Yamamoto or whoever the designer was. And then it was only that item,
I wish I was that strong, because I would love to have just a uniform every day in a dark blue, every day the same, like a uniform. I just can't do it. So it's all, again, yin yang, and at the end of the day, I'm just a normal guy that does want to have a nice, a comfy sofa to watch Netflix.
Yeah. Hallelujah. You're human after all, Paul. Otherwise, it would be too much. Okay, one last one, and then I'm going to let you go, sir. A bucket list, space, home, or brand you'd love to inject your interior design essence into. And it can be, I know it's not going to be a home. Let's take out home because I know you don't like the more personal space, but a building or even a brand. Take away from the spatial design, your creative design you'd like to inject into it.
It's the difficult one, and but I'll try to keep it short. And I have to think of religious spaces.
Okay.
And maybe redefine them. Because I think we are redefining our spiritual lives, and I don't think we have protected environments for that now. I think the buildings that try they're not relevant anymore, but we do have a spiritual urge. And but where do you go? And what does it mean? I don't know. I don't have the answer.
But I find that the most intriguing answer, because what would be your parameters in evolving the concept of a spiritual space, right?
Oh, maybe to me, that's the gallery, and I only want that little mat to lie on and enjoy the nothingness.
So it's the less is more feeling.
Yes. Yeah. Can you leave things out? Can you leave another thing out?
So it's a process of reduction.
Yes, it is. Definitely.
There's this very famous music producer, Rick Rubin.
Okay.
And he's legendary because he's worked on every genre of music imaginable, from the Red Hot Chili Peppers to Johnny Cash, everyone in between. And Rick Rubin, his official job title is producer. And someone asked him, "What's your secret to being such a great producer?" He says, "Because I'm not a producer, I'm a reducer." And that's your philosophy as well, right? Interestingly, religious spaces, I kind of feel that the churches, for example, they are like galleries to me, because you have these grand stations of the cross and the crucifix and statues, right?
Yes.
It kind of feels like they thought of the same thing, that feeling of awe you have when you step into a beautiful gallery of masterpieces, right?
Yes, yes.
You feel overwhelmed,
yes,
and that's a spiritual feeling in itself.
Absolutely.
When you see it, something so beautiful.
Absolutely, yes.
Paul, I would love for this to materialize in the physical world, that one day I'm going to read that Paul Linse has been commissioned to create a new concept of a spiritual space.
That would be great, wouldn't it?
Yeah. And on that note, I'm going to leave us on a high. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
It's been an absolute pleasure. And I would love to have a round 2 with you.
I would love that. The pleasure was all mine. Thank you.
Thank you.